Hello, everybody. I hadn't realised that I was waiting on this screen rather than the other one. That was a little bit of a mistake on my end. Sorry about that one. But I thought I would do a little bit of a preview kind of thing for the match against Fulham, because that is coming up later today at 3 o'clock, which is one that I'm very much looking forward to. Football is finally back. It's taken its goddamn time. And it's returned with a little bit of a kick in the teeth, because we don't particularly enjoy trips to London for obvious reasons, and we don't particularly hugely enjoy returning from international breaks. So this is one of those that could go either way. It could go really good, it could go really bad, but I thought I'd have a little bit of a deep dive into what Fulham have done so far this season, what Leeds United have done so far this season, and ultimately what sort of direction it feels like this match is going to go. But before I do so, I'd hugely appreciate you popping a like on the stream, subscribing if you're not yet. And when it comes to it, and I'm just going to put this request out there, if anyone's got any questions about anything, please shout them at me, because I like having that little rapport, that little bouncy off the chat to sort of see where we're going. It's always nice, it's always good, it's always fun to have you guys with me. But we've got a fair bit to discuss in this one, including the way that Fulham have been going, the way that we're likely to set up, and I figured I would start with the way that Leeds are going to set up, because that is what people sort of care about right now. Given the transfer window, given the way that came to an end, people are looking at the situation and kind of going, well, I don't quite know what Leeds United look like at the minute, because we were expecting another winger in, all this kind of stuff. So what does it actually mean? So I have built this. It's my new cheeky little whiteboard, my new little tactical board that I've put together for myself, which is quite nice, which has all of the Leeds United squad players just waiting by the side that can be dragged and dropped in as I need. And this is what I've roughly gone with as the lineup. So we know for a fact that we will not have Lucas Perry available for this one. That's fine, that's dandy, that's all good. Instead of that, we're going to opt for Karl Darlow in goal, because he's obviously our second choice at the minute, given the whole everything of the situation surrounding Illan Meslier. If Karl Darlow isn't in goal, I would be a little bit concerned, a little bit worried, and assume that we were very much heading in the wrong direction. Unless Darlow is injured, in which case we've got a whole new problem to talk about. Backline is one that I know is going to be a little bit of interest, a little bit of a controversial one for some folk, and I completely understand that. I understand people have their views on who should be in that defensive line, and that is completely fine and dandy and all good. But I've gone with, I'll start with the easy ones. We know that Gudmundsson is going to be the starting left back, because Gudmundsson is a very, very, very good left back. He's proven himself to be, quite frankly, really solid at this level already so far this season. And Jayden Bogle, because obviously that one also just kind of makes sense. Jayden Bogle was our player of the month last month, and the other option is either James Justin, who hasn't really played there in this system, or Sam Byram, who, let's be honest, isn't really starting Premier League quality. He's there as decent backup, but, you know, you don't really pick him to start matches against Fulham right now. The rest of the back line, however, is what a lot of people might not necessarily like. So I've opted for Rodon, which is the obvious option, but you kind of have to put Rodon in there, because if you don't put Rodon in there, then he's kind of the guy that's been the rock for the entirety of Daniel Farke's time at Leeds United, so swapping him out feels a little bit daft. And I've also gone with a little Pascal Struijk. Now, this is the one that might make people a little bit grumpy, but there is a good reason that I've gone with Pascal Struijk, and that is the fact that Jakub Biol was away on international duty for the last 2 weeks. We know that international duty has tended to cause problems before. The reason that I think Biol is the way to go in this specific case is he didn't have a great time when he was away with his national team, and he wasn't hugely starting beforehand. I don't think you give a player their first Premier League start coming off the back of an international break where they haven't particularly impressed. It means that they might not necessarily be up to speed. They've been playing a little bit more football, so they're less well rested, and ultimately it feels like a little bit of a risk. So I just thought I thought I'd cover that one off. I've also made a mistake in my predicted lineup that I'm going to rejig in a moment, but I have gone with Ampadu as my defensive midfielder for this one. We know that Ampadu is on track for recovery at the moment. He's returning gradually from his once at the start of every single season injury that he seems to get, which is becoming tradition now. And I like a good tradition, but not when it involves Ethan Ampadu being particularly injured. But he was further back in the recovery train than Autanaka was. Now, Ilya Gruev had a little bit of drama surrounding him when it came to the international break, which not everyone is going to be a big fan of, but like, I'll be honest, I kind of was. It was good to see him stand up for himself in that manner. But if you've got Ampadu available to you, you have to play him. The one edit that I am going to make is that I had accidentally dragged and dropped Naka in rather than Longstaff. Longstaff I've whacked in off the back of two things. So one, there is the fact that he performed really, really well against Newcastle. Sort of an ideal place for him to do really well because he was facing off against his prior squad. But in addition to that, with Tanaka not being 100%, you've got a decision to make. Do you want to risk Tanaka, or do you just want to keep Longstaff in and see how that one goes? The way that rotation has always worked under Daniel Farke is people will get really, really long runs in the team, and then at some point in time, that run will come to an end because of an injury, primarily. And I think Tanaka getting that injury means he's going to have to fight his way back in, especially since Longstaff did really, really well in that match against Newcastle United, where he was a very crunching, tackly boy. And that sort of physicality is something that you don't necessarily get out of Tanaka. Relating to physicality, we've also got Anton Stack, who I think is unquestionable for his role in the midfield at the minute. He has been a ridiculously good player for us, and long may it continue. So he has to sort of slip in there no matter what. I've also opted for a slight change in the front three. So we know that Piru has a knock, we know that Mecha has a knock, and they were questionable whether or not they would be able to make it back. The reason that I've gone with Calvert-Lewin is that in the Premier League you want to spend a little bit of time doing prep for your opponents, and that includes sort of physical training and thinking like, right, okay, how are they going to mark up against me? How am I going to battle against them? And that's something that you do in training to make sure that you've got like the practical sense of that down. With Mecha and Piru having knocks and potentially having not done all the training that they will have wanted to do, I will personally go in the direction of Calvert-Lewin. If Daniel Farke goes the other way on it, fine, that's all good. He probably knows more than me in this situation. But I just personally lean towards Calvert-Lewin as a little bit of a safer option. And I made a few adjustments on the wings as well. Whacking in Okafor because a few reasons, to be honest. One is a bit of a meta reason. It's not like a reason surrounding his game. But I personally don't think he would have done a big ol' interview with The Athletic if he wasn't up for a start coming back from the international break. That feels like that would be a very weird PR move to do, so I'm heading in the direction of Okafor on that flank. In addition to the fact that he's had a little bit more time training, he's had a little bit more time getting familiar with the squad, and I think he can probably match the standard relatively easily. On the other side, I've just realised he's not at the right height. There we go. I've gone with Willy Gnonto. Another of the reasons that I went with Okafor in is that I kind of wanted to say James out, just because James, towards the end of a match, with that explosiveness and that pace and that intensity and power that he brings, is something that is going to be absolutely key to getting what we need from the game. So I think him coming on as a sub is better, with Gnonto causing issues from the early stages. So Okafor out on the left, Gnonto out on the right, I think will work ideally, and it means that you're going to have plenty of threat since they can do decent interlinking stuff with Calvert-Lewin as well. One of the main benefits, I think, of Gnonto out on that right flank is that he's really good at the sort of drifting in and causing occasional problems for the defenders, and occasionally playing in that sort of false 10 position, where he slots into that half space between the wing and the centre. So roughly, he won't necessarily just stick here, because this is the area that Bogle wants to attack when he's hitting his overlaps. Instead, he'll want to sort of hit the... You're the wrong guy. He'll want to hit sort of these spaces here, cause an issue where the fullback is like, well, maybe I want to come in to deal with it. Centre-back's dragged out of position as well, and that means there is more space for Calvert-Lewin to push through the middle. And it simultaneously means that there's more room for Bogle on the outside to find that drilled ball into Calvert-Lewin, who hopefully hits his shots, which is going to be the dream. Wow, it's raining right now. Okay, sorry, I just had a look out the window and it is absolutely battering it down. That is spectacular. It is, however, firing the glare from the roof opposite into my eyes. Hello, Wayne. Hope you're well. So that's why I'd go for that rough squad, at least to start with. There's a little bit of me that thinks that maybe there is a shout for Dan James starting because he can refine that form, but I wouldn't want to sort of take the risk of it instantly. And I think maybe giving Okafor a start could be a good idea. I think Calvert-Lewin is maybe the one that a lot of people might have a disagreement with. If Mecha is available, they want to lean towards him for obvious reasons, because Mecha has that physicality that Calvert-Lewin doesn't necessarily do. But I'm hopeful. And if we line up like this, I will have no problem with it. But then again, if we line up in any other way, I'm not exactly going to be mad. Fulham, throughout this season so far, have lined up in more of a 4-2-3-1 kind of structure, which I think is going to be interesting for us to match up against, because we know that Fulham are a reasonably good side. They arguably should have beaten Chelsea in their match with them, but, and it's a pretty big but, and I'm going to have a look at the table. Fulham currently sit in 18th. There's a very, very strong argument that they are incredibly hard done by to be sitting there in the table. Because if you have a look at the data behind that, if I just zoom in a touch and have a look at their matches so far this season. So you got the match against Brighton, where, sure, they were beaten fair and square. They weren't as good as Brighton were. Got the match against Scum, which ended 1-1. However, if you take a deep dive into this one, if I can find it, they were very much sort of under the cosh a little bit, Manchester United. Man United weren't the good side in this one. They were being hemmed in by Fulham very consistently. They were causing a hell of a lot of problems. Nice and sunny in Leeds, you bastard. And a big chunk of the XG that they got, which was a total of 1.6, came from this penalty from Bruno Fernandes, which is maybe telling that they weren't quite as good as the data says, and a Rodrigo Muniz on goal was the only thing that kept them in that game of football. And then you come to the game against Chelsea, where Fulham were firmly the better side. But again, they got a little bit VAR'd at points. I feel like if you have a look at the season so far and you have a look at the various performances that are being put up by a wealth of teams, quite a lot of the time you get squads being deeply unhappy with what's gone on because, let's be honest here, the refereeing's not been fantastic. So Fulham, decent side, and are one that we should maybe be a little bit worried about, but it's the way that we'll sort of match them tactically, which I think is also of interest. So I'll come back over to my monitor. There we go. And see that they're in that 4-2-3-1. Now, we know how the majority of this side likes to play. So we know Gnonto will tuck in relatively. Okafor will sort of do similar. He's someone that tends to sort of dribble against his opponent. Being someone that can typically, I say typically, that has often played at striker even though he hasn't wanted to. He's therefore someone that is now naturally drifting inside a little bit more. So I'll put him about here. We're talking attacking phase at the moment, just to be completely clear. And we know what Gudmundsson will do. We know what Bogle will do. Gudmundsson will do that nice little running down the outside thing for cutting the ball back. Bogle will do exactly the same thing. So we will play this out as an attack down the right-hand side. And this is just going to be something that I'm going to advise you guys to keep an eye out for. So I'll say in the event that Gnonto has the ball, or something like that. Something that I think we'll see a decent amount of is a case of Okafor will cut inside, Calvert-Lewin will be about here, Stack will be somewhere behind, I don't know, and then you'll have these three sitting deep. As always, we're going to have the Strauch, we're going to have the Ampadu, we're going to have the Rodon sitting deep. If the lineup is different, then that's fine. But this is still going to be the rough shape and structure where you're going to have that front three, and it's going to effectively in possession turn into that 3-4-3 with the midfielders occasionally popping forwards a bit, your wingers cutting inside somewhat more, because that means if I can go to elements and I can go to ball, we'll go with that one. That's a nice looking ball, isn't it? We'll say Gnonto's got it to begin with, because why not? What we will effectively do is be in a position where every single time Bogle will do that thing that Bogle does, and he'll look for the option around the outside. And now, given the fact that we've got Calvert-Lewin in here instead of... sorry if I offended you the other... No, it's fine. I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to. It's all good. But given that you've got Jayden Bogle, and you've got Jayden Bogle potentially getting the ball on the outside, we will see Calvert-Lewin do that thing that Bamford did time and time again when he was in the squad, and you'll see that near post run. and you'll see the ball come in, and maybe he'll miss a few, sure. But Calvert-Lewin is that sort of profile of player that is going to do things a little bit different to what you see from a Piru and what you see from a Mecha. Because we know that Piru and Mecha are those more physical players. Mecha's a bit hold up. Piru will drop deeper into the 10. Calvert-Lewin is that typical standard number 9 who's just going to do the aggressive stuff. Who's just going to do the running in behind. Who's just going to do the, I'm going to get myself in a position to get a chance here. And if you can't stop me, then that's your problem. And that's kind of what we need him to do, to be completely honest. In fact, I'm going to get this to the right level of zoom. There is no right level of zoom. Fan-debby-dozy. But that's what we hope for. Good afternoon, War Piglet. Hope you're good. And this is what I'm seeing on both sides as sort of the attacking structure. So in this case, if you have Bogle here, you're not only going to see Calvert-Lewin making this run, you're going to see Okafor aiming for the back post, because obviously if Calvert-Lewin misses the ball, you need someone there to deal with it. There'll be centre-backs, of course. I can't be bothered moving them, I'll be completely honest with you. But in addition to that, you'll still have Longstaff and Nonto in this sort of area because we like doing that little bit of interplay, playing those triangles in the wide areas. But one that we might want to keep an eye out for is Stack. Because if and I'm going to have to grab everyone now, aren't I? Okay. Because if we pack out the box, like it realistically will be if we're in these positions and a ball is coming in. So we'll put Longstaff over here, Nonto over here, defender here, someone out to challenge Bogle, you're there. And I don't know where these lads are going to be. They're going to be somewhere. But what we can see a lot of from Stack, and what I expect to see a decent amount this season, is balls not necessarily... Thank you for subscribing, Paul Atkinson. Is balls not necessarily just being zinged into Calvert-Lewin or zinged across to try and get to Noah Okafor. But I think you're going to see a decent number of these box-crushing runs where Anton Stack is going to make his move into relative space. Because what you'll do as a defensive structure is, a lot of the time, you won't necessarily be tracking that run from midfield. You won't be tracking that sort of spare man who isn't necessarily going to be the threat. Instead, you're going to be keeping an eye on the goal threats. So in this case, you are closing down Longstaff and Nonto because they are relatively close to the ball, likely to receive a pass, and that could cause you a problem. You are likely to close down Calvert-Lewin because he's a number 9. You're likely to close down Okafor because if he gets in free at the back post, problems. This means that occasionally you're going to get a spare man as the attacking side, and if that is Anton Stack, and if we're able to get him into these dangerous positions, fantastic. Love to see it. Will be causing a lot of problems for other teams. If we can't do that, then we can't do that, and that's okay. But that's something that I see happening relatively often. In terms of the defensive side of the game, this is the side of the game that I am significantly worse at talking about. So I'm just going to say try and defend good. I think what we might try to do is... Oh, it's going to be hard to rebuild these teams here. Hang on. Mash it back into the 4-2-3-1. There we go. What I think we might try and do is, because they've got more wingers now, because they signed about 1,000 wing players on deadline day, which kind of makes sense. Like, I understand where they're coming from. It's annoying, but I see it, is we might try to be a little bit more compact defensively. We might try and tuck in a touch more. Which I know a lot of people will tend to go, well, that's not necessarily a great idea. But what you do by doing this, and because these guys tend to play a bit deeper alongside Ampadu when they are the wingers, because that means that you get less doubled up on. Midfielders will be the ones that push forward a little bit because they tend to lead the press. It tends to be Stack and Longstaff alongside your striker that will be leading the press as like a group of 3, with the wingers tucking in to make sure your fullback doesn't get doubled up on. But the shape that you've sort of formed here is... we'll go with that one. Sort of this. You've made yourself a sort of defensive cone, which means that when other sides are trying to attack, it's really hard to get the ball into these areas because you're just going to bounce off a little bit. However, what you might see a bit more of instead is teams being forced to try and go around the outside, which means that they're going to try and work hard on Goodmanson, they'll try and work hard on Okafor. Stack will have to come outside a little bit, they'll try around this flank as well, because now we know that they've got plenty of wingers. They have plenty of wingers that like to cut inside and have a go. That's the case with Kevin, that's the case with Chukwueze. So keep them outside. And at that point, your threat is Rodrigo Muniz. Because if they're in these wide areas and you've been able to just sort of like stodge them out and sort of Burnley it a little bit and make things incredibly hard to like penetrate into, you're in the best position possible. So they might try and hit the flanks. They might try and double up out here, but in that case, Nonto. If I can't click Nonto. There we go. I can't even click. Right, fuck it. In that case, you got Willie Nonto, who can just go, no, okay, I'll stick wide. Longstaff come across a little bit. Calvert-Lewin can dip in. Force them into those wide areas. Make them work incredibly hard to get the ball into the dangerous spaces, and we'll be a lot happier and a lot more confident. And I feel significantly better about all of that, especially compared to how things went against Arsenal, where we made ourselves relatively easy to play through the middle of, which hopefully we don't have to deal with this time. And I'll be honest, there's one thing that I want to see our backline do a little bit more this time, and it's stick a foot in. So much of the time you'll see a lot of more like defensive players not want to just say, okay, I'll challenge him, because if I clip him, it's a foul or it's a penalty or something like that. So I think being careful with it is maybe one of the best ways to go. Maybe. We'll have to find out. But we'll see. What I am going to do, though, is I'm just going to have a little bit of a sort of general chat about the match. In fact, I might have to nip off in a moment. But in terms of what I think will happen in the match, we've got a few factors to consider. One is, I know it's not a rational thing, the London curse. The London curse is a bit of a nightmare. But it's not like rational, so I don't know how I feel on it. Anthony Robinson's going to be a problem. I think he will, yeah. But this is why I think we need to do the defending sort of tight thing, because effectively that exposes Anthony Robinson to playing on his own. You can't cut it on the inside because, well, you've just slammed the door shut for most of his passing lanes. So that's what we need to be a little bit aware of. I think Darlow's distribution could be key for us. He can actually hit a pass to our wingers and forward on the break. I honestly don't think Darlow is necessarily the right way to go with it. I think Darlow, whilst his distribution is decent, I still don't reckon it's as good as Perry's. More worried about Harry Wilson. I don't think Harry Wilson starts, to be completely honest with you. I think having signed that many wingers on deadline day, Harry Wilson starting for Fulham would be a proper surprise for me. I know he's played all 3 matches so far this season for them, but I can't see it. Not for me. Sorry, sorting the occasional bug thing. But yeah, anyway. I'm going to have kept this one relatively short, though, because I'll be honest, I fancy watching the lunchtime kickoff and I need to get something to eat before Leeds play. So, general prediction for the match, I'm going to lean Leeds. Ooh, a little bit me want to say Leeds win, but I'm not certain. Fuck it. Leeds will win. It will be 1-0 and it'll be relatively scrappy. But you know what? I'm going to be fairly happy with it, and that's all good. Anyway, I've got some bits to deal with, so I'm going to leave that there. Hope you all enjoyed. Was that my starting 11? Yes, assuming injuries and things and taking a couple of guesses. That's what I'm going to go with. But I've got to go. So, hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please pop a like on the stream. That's massively appreciated. Subscribe if you haven't yet. That is also absolutely fantastic. Or even be a channel member. It's $2.99 for a month. You get videos early, all that kind of shit. Absolutely wonderful. So, yeah. Hope you all enjoyed. And I will see all of you guys later. And hopefully that comes after a Leeds United win. Doodaloo. I would absolutely take a 4-0 win, by the way. I don't think it'll happen, but I'd take it. I'd be all over that. Anyway, toodaloo.